They ridiculed her, cut her off, and attempted to tarnish her image. Now, they're the ones pleading for forgiveness. Karoline Leavitt had endured challenging interviews before. She was no stranger to resistance, particularly from the liberal media. But this time was different. This wasn't just political sparring or a fiery exchange, it was a deliberate, calculated assault. She had been invited onto the talk show, under the guise of discussing policy, or so they claimed. But the moment she took her seat, she felt the atmosphere shift. The tension in the room wasn't the typical clash of opposing views. It felt like a trap. The initial questions were routine, even predictable. Then, without warning, one of the hosts leaned forward, their voice sharp with more than just skepticism. "Let's be honest, Karoline. You're not here because of your credentials. You're here because of your loyalty. That's why you got the job, isn't it?" The audience reacted instantly, gasps, murmurs, a few stifled laughs. Karoline's expression remained steady, but inside, she felt the shift. This wasn't an interview anymore. It was a performance, and she was the target. She took a deep, measured breath. Losing her composure was exactly what they wanted. "I'm here because I've earned my place," she replied calmly. "If you disagree, let's discuss policy, not personal attacks." But they weren't interested in policy. They wanted a reaction. Another host smirked, glancing at the audience before delivering the next blow. "Earned? Or handed to you? Because from where we're sitting, loyalty seems to be the only qualification these days." This time, the audience applauded. Karoline knew exactly what was happening. The segment had been scripted. The lines rehearsed. The goal wasn't dialogue, it was humiliation. The next few minutes were a blur of interruptions, dismissive laughter, and loaded questions designed to make her appear incompetent. No matter what she said, it was twisted, reframed, or ignored entirely. The show wasn't about conversation. It was about control. But Karoline didn't break. She stood her ground, countered with facts, and refused to give them the emotional outburst they craved. As the segment neared its end, the host delivered the final blow. "Women like you set us back. You're a pawn, and deep down you know it." The room fell silent. Even the audience seemed unsure how to react. Karoline's jaw tightened not out of anger, but out of a deeper realization. They weren't attacking her because they believed their words. They were attacking her because they were afraid. She smiled slowly, deliberately. "If standing up for my beliefs makes me a pawn, then so be it. But at least I'm not a puppet." The segment ended, the cameras stopped rolling, and the damage was done, or so they thought. What they underestimated was the backlash that would follow. The clip spread across the internet like wildfire. Within hours, it was everywhere: Twitter, YouTube, every conservative news outlet. At first, the network tried to control the narrative, editing the segment to frame it as just another heated debate. But the full, unedited version was already out, and it told a very different story. Conservatives weren't just angry, they were outraged. Comment sections flooded with accusations of media bias, double standards, and outright bullying. Even those who weren't staunch supporters of Karoline couldn't deny what they had seen. This wasn't a debate. It was an attack. Hashtags exploded. Number media bias. Number stand with Karoline. Number cancel the show. Republican politicians weighed in. Conservative commentators dissected the exchange frame by frame. And even some liberals admitted the hosts had gone too far. But it didn't stop there. The show's sponsors started getting tagged. Viewers weren't just angry, they were strategic. They flooded advertisers with messages, demanding to know why they supported a platform that openly degraded women who didn't conform to their politics. Some companies ignored the backlash. Others issued vague statements. But then, one of the show's biggest sponsors pulled out. Their statement was carefully worded, avoiding controversy while making it clear they wanted no part of divisive and unprofessional discourse. That was the first domino. The rest fell quickly. The network scrambled into damage control mode. Anonymous sources leaked reports of panic, behind-the-scenes executives demanding answers, frantic meetings about how to salvage their reputation. The hosts remained silent at first, then released a half-hearted statement about passionate discussions and differing perspectives. But it was too late. Karoline hadn't spoken publicly yet. She didn't need to. Whispers began circulating that she was preparing a lawsuit, not just for defamation, but for targeted harassment, professional harm, and possibly even coordinated media misconduct. The network had faced backlash before, but this was different. Karoline sat in a dimly lit office in Washington, D.C., across from her legal team. Stacks of documents covered the table, some still warm from the printer. The stakes were clear. This wasn't just about a viral moment or a political spat. This was about accountability. A senior attorney, a no-nonsense woman with years of media litigation experience, set her pen down and leaned back. The defamation angle is strong, but we can also argue professional harm. This wasn't just criticism, it was an orchestrated attempt to discredit you. Karoline listened carefully. She wasn't one to rush into legal battles, but this was different. This was about principle. The deeper they dug, the worse it got. Internal emails surfaced, revealing conversations between producers and staff that hinted the segment had been pre-planned as an exposé, not a genuine interview. One line stood out. Make sure she stumbles. Cut her off if she gets too comfortable. This wasn't journalism, it was an ambush. By the next morning, news broke. Karoline Leavitt was officially pursuing legal action. The network's response was immediate and chaotic. Their lawyers issued statements calling the lawsuit frivolous and a desperate political stunt, but the damage was already spreading. This wasn't just about Karoline anymore, it was about media ethics, about how certain voices were treated on national platforms. The backlash intensified. More advertisers pulled out, ratings plummeted, and viewers on both sides of the aisle began asking the same question. If they had nothing to hide, why were they scrambling? Then something unexpected happened. A former producer came forward first anonymously, then publicly. In an exclusive interview, she admitted what many had suspected. The show had a history of coordinating attacks against conservative guests. Producers were instructed to push them into uncomfortable moments, cut them off, mock them subtly, and control the edit. She provided emails, memos, and unedited footage from past interviews, making it clear that what happened to Karoline wasn't an accident, it was standard practice. Suddenly, this wasn't just a lawsuit, it was an exposé, and the network was running out of ways to spin it. Inside the network's headquarters, the atmosphere was tense. Executives barked orders, legal teams huddled over conference tables, and PR specialists scrambled to craft the perfect damage control statement. They had weathered controversies before, but this wasn't just another bad press cycle, it was a full-blown crisis. The network released an official statement, but it fell flat. We stand by our commitment to free and open discussion. While we regret any misunderstanding, we maintain that our hosts acted within the bounds of spirited debate. It was a carefully worded non-apology, and it only made things worse. Viewers saw right through it. By the next morning, the show's social media pages were in freefall. Comments were disabled, dislikes skyrocketed, and more advertisers severed ties. The message was clear. Corporate sponsors didn't want the heat. Then came the first major internal casualty. One of the show's lead producers resigned. The press release called it a mutual decision, but insiders leaked the truth. They were trying to contain the fire. But it was too late. The legal proceedings had officially begun. Karoline's team subpoenaed internal records, uncovering more evidence of coordinated media bias and targeted defamation. What they found was worse than anyone had anticipated: more emails, more memos, undeniable proof that the network wasn't just reporting news, they were manipulating it. And then, the biggest bombshell yet. A second former employee came forward. This time it wasn't just about the talk show, it was about the entire network. They alleged that this wasn't an isolated incident, that certain guests were systematically discredited, silenced, and ridiculed to fit a pre-approved narrative. Suddenly, Karoline's case wasn't just about Herod, it was about the credibility of the entire media institution. As the legal battle heated up, the network faced a chilling reality. They weren't just fighting Karoline anymore. They were fighting the truth. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled every seat, their cameras and notebooks ready to capture every detail. Outside, the scene was even more chaotic. Protesters, supporters, and media vans lined up for blocks. This wasn't just a lawsuit. It had become a cultural battleground. Karoline sat beside her attorneys, calm but focused. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment. The network's legal team was formidable. But she knew they weren't just fighting her, they were fighting their own past mistakes. The trial began with opening arguments. Karoline's lawyers laid it out plainly. This case isn't about political differences. It's about media accountability. Our client was targeted, discredited, and professionally harmed not through honest journalism, but through calculated deception. Then came the evidence, the leaked emails, the producer's testimony, the unedited footage from previous interviews that revealed a clear pattern of coordinated bias. Every piece tightened the noose around the network. Their defense team argued that heated debate was normal, that Karoline was playing the victim. But when the former producer took the stand, the entire courtroom fell silent. She testified under oath that producers were given pre-show instructions to ensure conservative guests never came out looking strong. When she read one particular email aloud, "Do not let her finish full sentences. Keep control. Mock lightly. Make her lose credibility," the room was stunned. That single line shattered any illusion that the interview had been fair. The network's attorneys fought back, calling the show's format entertainment, not journalism. They argued that guests should expect tough questioning. But Karoline's attorneys countered with something even more damning: a video montage comparing how liberal guests were treated versus conservatives. One side showed respectful interviews, uninterrupted responses, and softball questions. The other was a barrage of interruptions, sarcasm, mockery, and cheap shots disguised as debate. The jury watched in silence. The contrast was undeniable. Then came the financial records. Karoline's team presented data proving her reputation had suffered measurable damage: speaking engagements canceled, opportunities withdrawn, a deliberate attempt to silence her. At that moment, the case shifted. This wasn't just a media controversy anymore. It was a reckoning. As closing arguments wrapped up, the jury had one question to answer: did the network cross the line? The entire country waited for the verdict. The jury's decision came faster than expected. When the judge re-entered the courtroom, everyone held their breath. Karoline sat still, her hands folded in her lap. The network's legal team, once confident, now looked drained. The foreperson stood. "In the matter of defamation and professional harm, we, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff, Karoline Leavitt." Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Karoline closed her eyes for a brief moment, exhaling as the weight of the past few months finally lifted. The damages were significant: multi-million-dollar settlement, a public admission of wrongdoing. The network was forced to issue a formal apology, not just to Karoline, but to every guest who had been subjected to their tactics. But the fallout didn't stop there. The show was officially canceled. The network framed it as a restructuring decision, but everyone knew the truth. Advertisers weren't coming back. The brand was too toxic. More employees came forward, exposing more unethical practices. This wasn't just a loss for the network, it was a turning point for political media. And Karoline? Her career didn't just survive, it thrived. She became a symbol of pushing back against media manipulation. Book deals, speaking engagements, a stronger platform than ever. But she didn't use it to gloat. Instead, she left the public with this: it's not about silencing people you disagree with. It's about accountability. The media isn't supposed to manufacture reality. It's supposed to report it. And that was a message no one could ignore.